As I was saying before we ran out of memory there, these are the side panels for the canopy. You want to make note that there is a forward and a aft section because, or forward and aft side, because of the angle of the canopy is different on the front and the back. So they go, they'll go onto the sides up to the plastic, and then of course the rear ribbon comes back down, the strap in the back covers the rest of it. So those are the sides, and then these are the retaining strips that go along with these. And if I can get this right, basically this is to hold the plastic, so you don't have any rivets through that line of the canopy down the side. It basically goes on here. It'll make more sense when we put it together, but you rivet around this line here, and that allows the plastic to be gripped inside there. So those should be in your kit, 2 of those, 1 on each side. And then pretty much what's left is the latch assembly and the retaining strap, but that'll make more sense. There should be 2 steel rods, a forward and an aft rod with the latch. Of course, they get driven obviously off of the actuator here, forward and back. So, and then what's not in this clip, we'll make sure that we show it in the installation, is the safety catch for this canopy. We've had a canopy pop open. And with any canopy latch, you want to make sure that there's a safety or a lock inside, unless it's an over-center type thing that can't pop open. But this one can actually vibrate back and open, as we found out. So now we've used a little piece of sheet metal so that when this comes forward, a sheet metal catch goes behind, we'll show it, but it goes behind the nut on the inside so that it's a positive lock. You can't open it. That's real important. Then just the retaining strap and the retaining hardware. So that's all the components. We'll get things mocked up a little bit here. We'll show you how it goes together. Okay, we've got stuff clecoed in place. The first thing we start with when we start putting this together is you want to clamp the bows, get those fitted really well to your mating surface. For the windshield bow up front here, remember the plastic is going to come down and fit to the plastic. Then when you get down to the side, of course, it's just sheet metal down here, so it kind of has to run out to be flush. Windshield and the turtle deck is the same thing, except remember this plastic will stop on this bow, on the intermediate bow, and then this is just a sheet metal piece that comes over the back end. So we start by clamping these bows to the existing bows. Get your side rail pieces fit underneath. Get these corner gussets, just clamp them in place until you get everything where you want it. Then start drilling and clecoing these in. Then we set this bow. You'll find that your rear canopy cover is 8 inches. So if you set this at 8 inches from top to bottom, this is just a piece of scrap to hold it at 8 inches. Come down to the bottom here, and we measure perpendicular off of this back surface. You can make it whatever you want. If you want to make it 7 inches, your canopy's long enough, but you're going to end up trimming something. So we just set it at 8 inches. That piece will fit nicely back here, and of course when we set the canopy on, that'll be the next step. We'll see that it hangs over about 2 and 3 inches up here and 1 inch down here. We just mark that line, and that'll be a whole nother session about cutting the canopy without the fear of scrapping it. So what we're going to do now is going to go ahead and cleco, or rivet, all these gussets in place. That'll pretty well firm up the frame, and then we'll come back and put the plastic in and get that trimmed a little bit. Okay, we're at a point where we've riveted everything solid now with the frame. I'll pull this off there for a minute. All the gusset plates are riveted in tight. It really firms this up pretty good. We still leave the clamps in place because you want that to be tight. If there's any little bit of spring or whatever, that's where you want it to fit flush when you get things back together. So next part is the canopy. Our standard canopy is the same canopy we use for all 3 models, for the Alta Cruiser, Humminbird, and H5. It started from the Humminbird, so probably the first thing you'll see is that it's too big. Well, if you had a Humminbird, you'd trim to these black lines and it would fit. The Alta Cruiser is a little different yet, but the H5, we got our own issues to deal with. So there is a front and a back. The angle is different in the front than it is in the back. Again, because the Hummel bird is that way, so we've carried that on through. We're pretty close to 110 degrees in the front, and obviously we're not that vertical in the back, but you got to trim all this off in the back anyway. So set in place, the important things are that, important to Maury and all of us Hummel fans, is that these body lines, if you will, panel lines, are kind of in line. So you're going to trim this canopy to a straight line that's just above the windshield molding line that comes across, and it'll follow it right back here. And that'll be apparent when you go to put the side panel on. You see that'll all stay in line. These are over bent, that should be laying more flat, but that line will come up and continue right straight through here. So that being said, we've had this set on there. You're going to have to trim the front because I guarantee you weren't perfect. We're not perfect with this one. There's a little bit of wave, so we're going to mark this with a marker. Remember, you've got felt in between the bows in the front and at the turtleneck. There's a seal. So we're going to trim it so the felt is exposed. So it'll be about an 1/8 inch gap in the plastic between the windshield and the canopy. We'll mark that line, we'll trim that. This one up here, the safest way to probably trim this in a little bit is to sand it, either with a belt sander, a hand belt sander, something like that. When you get to cutting the edges, we use a bandsaw, a real fine tooth blade on a bandsaw with, you know, abrasive protection on the table and 2 people to help hold it, and it goes real quick. And then we just final sand down to the line the way we do it. You can also use an abrasive cutoff tool, any kind of air-driven cutoff tool. It's, you know, again, stay controlled, maybe have somebody hold the canopy while you're doing the trimming. But these work real well. The professionals use a little carbide tooth saw blade, which works really great, but if it gets away from you, you're going to crack the canopy. So abrasive isn't bad. Bandsaw works pretty good. Again, fine tooth though. You don't want anything that's a wood cutting bandsaw with a chip tooth, a skip tooth blade or something like that. You want something that's pretty fine. You know, at least 12 to 14 pitch, something like that. So that's the next thing is we're going to make this fit up here. We're going to mark across the back of this bow. Again, because this will fasten to the bow and then the sheet metal goes over everything on the back, and we're going to trim these sides and get it ready to attach. Okay. When the canopy is set on the airplane, we'd like to clamp the back downs to the bow so we can get the front trimmed nice. We put a red line on the back end about a 1/2 inch long past the bow, and I just thought we'd show you how we do it here with a bandsaw. Again, it's a real fine tooth blade. Takes a pretty good sized saw, you know, 10 or 12 inch maybe, something like that. But most of your woodworking bandsaws will work. You just have to get the right blade on it. Okay, that was just a rough cut, so we weren't trying to be too careful. Just try to keep it flat, but it's such a fine blade, even if it's not down to the table, it still cuts pretty well. And we'll talk a little bit about these edges. The whole key to this, when you get all finished, that you don't crack the canopy, is once you're done with it, this edge has to be polished. And we'll talk about how we polish that, probably the very last step. Okay, we've trimmed everything up. We basically made a cut line, you know, up to the bow in the back and to leave that 1/8 inch gap in the front. And then I always cut a little bit away and then sand up to it. You can use, you know, a belt sander, any kind of abrasive tool. We've got a pedestal mounted two-wheel sander over there that works real nice, but it's, unless you really catch it on the corner or something like that, you're not going to damage the canopy with a sanding belt. So we've done the front and the back. We've got our marks, you know, positioned up, keeping it centered here. Now we want to get this line that we talked about, this body line cut on the side. So basically you just need to put a straight edge up between the two, you know, between the two panels, the windshield panel and this line here, and then draw a line on there. And then we're going to cut that. And then all the canopy then will be rough cut. So at that point we're going to want to polish the edges. And I can't stress this enough how important it is. Most canopies that crack are because the edges weren't polished. Everybody thinks it because of a rivet hole or when they drilled it or something, but you can see this is the piece that we cut off the back. And if Dan can get a good picture here, it's just like you'd expect a bandsaw cut. Okay? So we could sand this down a little bit more in the belt sander, which is what this is going to look like here. It's a little smoother, not a lot, but a little bit. And when you get to a point where you think it's smooth, it's not. You got to really polish this, and I'll try and do a little spot here. I use a utility knife. You have to be really careful with this because you will slip off and put a big scratch across your canopy. But the other option, only other way to do it is just with sandpaper. Different grits of sandpaper all the way down to maybe 1,000 grit, something like that. But if you choose to do it this way, sounds real rough as you get started, because it is. As it starts to smooth out, just in the sound, you can hear that. And I'm working around the edge of it to get the corners of it, if you will, and then the rest of it smooth. Okay, now you can't tell from there probably, but I can run my fingernail on that. There's no bumps or nicks or scratches in it. I can do this whole edge in about 3 minutes with a scraper, but if I slip off and scratch the canopy, it's not good. So most people will opt to go with sandpaper. You know, this is 120 grit stuff here. If you start with it, and I can hear it smooth up. That's about all I can get with 120. Then you got to go to 400 and on down to 600, and you really want to wind up with 1,000 or crocus cloth to get it really smooth. And that won't be any smoother than what I did with a knife. But again, I can't stress enough how careful you have to be not to slip off. But if this is all polished nice, you don't have any stress risers in the edge. Of course, when we drill and rivet, we're going to put an 1/8 inch rivet in here, so we're going to drill a 5/32 hole with a drill bit designed to drill plastic, not a standard drill bit. There's a lot sharper angle on the plastic bits, and there's not as much chamfer in the bit, so it won't bite and pull through the plastic. If you don't have those, get them. Aircraft Sprue sells them. ATS, Aircraft Tool Supply. I'll send you one, you know, from here. If you bought a kit, it should have had one in it with the canopy anyway. But that's the whole key, is to be careful when you drill holes. Just take your time, use the right bit, you won't have any trouble. So we're going to trim this up and get it ready to rivet the next step. Okay, as we talked about before, we had these edges marked to cut them. We're leaving a gap so that the felt is exposed. You want to leave at least 1/16 of an inch, because remember, the canopy slides through the opening, it doesn't wrap over the top, so you can't have anything stick past there. It also protects that edge. If you run the edge of the plastic to the edge of the felt and it gets bumped or hit, there's no support for that plastic. I think you'll have a better chance of cracking it. So we keep it back so it's supported by the aluminum tube. We're ready now. Ignore all these lines, but we're going to draw a line about 1/4 of an inch above this panel line here, this crease in the turtle deck, and we've got the same crease up here in the windshield molding. So we're going to go up about 1/4 of an inch put a straight edge across there, and that's turned out to be this top red line. We'll do that on both sides. Canopy's clamped in place so it's not moving around, and that's where we're going to cut the sides. And after we cut, now you're ready to polish. It's really important that you polish these edges before you drill anything. You do not want to run a drill through here, because what people say, oh, I cracked my canopy drilling it. Well, you did, but it's probably because when you put pressure that close to the edge, if this is still rough on the edge, like this is the piece that we cut, you know, off the back edge, it's very, very rough on the edge. Well, all those marks have got stress risers in the edge of the material. You drill close, it actually doesn't crack from the drill bit to the edge, it cracks from the edge into the drill bit hole. Drill bit's going in, it's putting pressure on there, a stress riser shoots its way into the hole. So people say they drilled, you know, they think they ran the drill bit too fast or whatever. Well, could be, but typically it cracks from the edge. So really important that these edges are polished. You can do it a lot of different ways. The safest probably way is to just take sandpaper. You can run this on a belt sander or a 3x18 handheld belt sander. We've got a 2-wheel sander over there. But you want to get this sanded down first, maybe with 80 grit if that's what's on your belt sander. Then you can go to 120, down to whatever you've got, 400, 600 grit. Crocus cloth type polish is probably the best when you get all done, because this should be very, very smooth. If you can run your fingernail on there and feel anything, it's not polished yet. So I use what's called a bearing scraper. It's an old tool that my dad had and I've inherited it, but it basically just scrapes the edge. And I put my thumb on the inside, so I run it up against there, and that'll scrape that material away, and it'll get very, very smooth. You can do that. You can do it this way. This hasn't been sanded yet, so it's really rough. A utility knife will work. You can scrape the edges. As you can see though, the fear with this type system is if you slip off and run your knife across the canopy, now you've got a big scratch in your canopy. So scraping is one thing. Safest way is probably polishing. Even Scotch-Brite pad will, when you get down to it, will get real smooth. But again, make sure it's very, very smooth, and it'll actually polish right up, almost like glass on the edge. So it's really important that you do that. Remember, polish before you drill anything. So we're going to cut these edges off, get it polished up, get it set back in place, and go to the next step. Okay, we've made a little progress here. You can see we got things clicking together. I just thought I'd take a chance and take an opportunity here to point out some things that might make it easier. And to be honest with you, this is my least favorite part of the whole airplane. This is the least amount of parts with holes in it that we're going to ship you, because everything, it just has to be hand fit. There's just no way around it. You know, we have one being built here that's it's probably perfect, and Doug has taken 3 or 4 weeks to do this, the canopy on that, but he wants everything to fit right. We've probably spent 6 or 8 hours on getting this to this point. And it's more than acceptable. It'll be a nice airplane when we get done. But to get all the gaps exactly perfect and everything, it just takes a lot of time fitting back and forth. So one thing I want to point out is, as you call before, we had the frame all riveted together, and we were ready to start putting parts on the frame. We set the canopy in place, trimmed it to the bows, got that fitting really nice. Then the next part to put on is this canopy skirt, or the aft canopy skin, if you will. And of course, we're going to send you a part that's probably 1 inch longer front and back, because this shape, it's kind of a banana shape because of the, you know, the bow is, the leading edge is longer than the trailing edge. And to get that fit real perfect, as you can see, to get the line on this canopy bow and then have the front be exactly right is really, it's just not doable from our standpoint with the tooling that we have. So we're going to send you this skin that's a little longer, get it fit to the back edge first, over the canopy. If the canopy's in place, that's fine to get this back edge fit. What I would suggest though, when you go to do this line of holes and to trim this in the front, is take that canopy out of there, the piece that you cut off the back, use that as a spacer over this bow. That'll give you the material that you need so that this all stays in shape. For instance, if you just put this on here without the canopy and have this all fit real nice, you're gonna call me and need another piece of material, because when you shim that up, the 16th inch is about 60 thousandths thickness of the canopy, it's gonna kick this forward, and this is gonna be out a 1/4 inch down here at the bottom. So it has to be fit with the canopy or a real accurate shim, if you will, to get these holes in there. The problem is always, okay, now we got it in place, what's the sequence to drill? If you're real careful, you can take an 1/8 inch drill bit or a number 30 drill and drill through all this 3 stacks of material, the skin, the canopy, and the bow inside. But what's going to happen if you're not careful is you're going to go through this aluminum skin. At the very end, it's going to grab the drill bit and push you into the plastic, and it's probably going to crack. The first hole we did on this canopy, that's what happened. I heard a little snap. It cracks to the aft edge. We just polish it. It's not the end of the world. This canopy is going to be fine. But I think the better way to do it is, if it works with a spacer, to put this spacer in there, go ahead and drill through everything that cracks, you don't care. Now you've got a hole in the aluminum sheet and the aluminum tubing. Put your canopy back in, put this in place, just mark your canopy and drill it with a plastic drill bit, because it's an oversized drill anyway. So I really believe that's, we've gone around in this back and forth in the shop of what the best sequence is for this. We've kind of decided I think that's the best. Just be real careful. Just be careful when you drill the plastic. It's always the fear of everybody, to do that. We may explore down the road some way to eliminate any drilling. Just capture this through banding, through capturing strips on the leading edge and trailing edge of the canopy. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more hand fit work, again, to get those moldings fitting real nice. But that's how the Hummel bird's done. If anybody's familiar with the Hummel bird windshield, that's how those are captured. I will mention at this time, though, too, I'm going to try and find a canopy that would come all the way aft to eliminate this piece. Now we're just fitting plastic to bows, and if I can get that accomplished, all this becomes mute, and the canopy plastic is longer. I'm just not sure that that's available to us to get the canopy that much longer. So assuming we got that all down and good, the next part of the skin, the skirts on the bottom, they're pretty straightforward. Point out a couple things. Keep this line, with Maury, we've got to keep him happy, and Maury wants this brake line here and the molding all the way across, all the way to the turtle deck. It does look nice. It catches your eye. It flows nice. The plans don't show, I don't think, these little breaks on the edges that we've done. That just helps seal things down nice and keeps your polishing cloth from catching it and that kind of thing. Also, make sure you round these corners off. They're real sharp. You don't want them that sharp. You'll catch something on it. Hopefully it's not your knuckle, but keep those corners rounded off. And I think I probably showed you a tool like this before. It's just this happened to be a piece of Delrin with some little saw notches in it. That's what we use to make these edges. You just put a little pressure and run it down the edge. It just tweaks that edge down a little bit and breaks those over. The straight ones you can do in a brake, of course, but the ones that are on curved edges or radius edges like this is, after this is rolled, you have to be able to do it with something else. So again, I think we've showed you that tool before. So we're at a point now where the only pieces left to put in really is the latch assembly and these caption strips that go on the inside. There'll be a row of rivets across here with these strips in there to capture the edge of the canopy. Nothing goes through the canopy down here, just a row of rivets to clam or sandwich that in there. So that's all stuff. We're going to take this apart, deburr it, probably put it back on and rivet it, and then we'll do another little session on the caption strips and of course the latch assembly. That'll do it for now. I just want to point out a couple things we didn't talk about. Details to finish. Obviously we've got the canopy all tore back apart. We've deburred everything, ready to put it back together, but it's probably a good time to install the hinge. The hinge is just 12, 14 inches long. Keep in mind this is an extruded hinge. The rolled hinge is fine. We quit using it on the Canopy because if you're in a situation where the canopy blows open and slaps real hard, we've had this pull apart. We've had the rolled hinge actually open up. If it was, 2 or 3 feet long, it probably wouldn't unroll like that. But anyway, we've gone to this extruded hinge, much more expensive. In the kit, we give you this 14-inch piece and then a whole bunch of the rolled hinge for the elevator hinges and aileron hinges, but it's rolled hinge. What I've done here is I lined it up. There's a little bit of a bow if you choose to follow your side rail with this canopy frame. Just line it up, just hinge it. You're not going to bow the hinge, of course, because it won't work properly. So just I line it up flush on the back and flush on the front, Cleco it in place, drill it. I pull 2 soft rivets. Soft rivets are aluminum stem. You could use the Avex rivets. These are just easier to drill out since I know I'm going to drill them out. I just put aluminum stem, aluminum rivets in there. Then I'll, obviously now we can take the Clecos out, set it back in place. What I think works real well is if you take a piece of duct tape and lay it across here and set it back in place. Of course the Clecos are gone obviously. And set it back in place and leave the duct tape rolled up. Get it exactly where you want it. Wrap the duct tape down onto the side rail, pull the pin out, and then that positions this piece and you can go ahead and drill and install that. There may be other ways to do it, but that works well for us. Just want to point out the hinge process. One other item, now that we've got the hinge fastened down and kind of in place over there, there are 2 locator pins that come with your kit. These are to locate the canopy into the side rail just to keep it in position. They're just 832 screws with the threads ground off. We haven't found a better way to really do this and keep it simple. They're 1.25 inch screws. What we'll do is the tap drill for an 832 is number 29. So, and the number 30 drill is okay. With it being aluminum, you can tap it out with the number 30 drill. But we're going to come forward about 3 or 4 inches. Your plans probably tell you exactly where to put it, but come forward 3 or 4 inches and then back from the leading edge here in the front of the canopy 3 or 4 inches. And just drill a hole straight through everything. We got it clamped in place so we know that's where we want it to be. Drill a hole straight through. That hole will be the locator hole then for your pin. And the top up here, we're going to then tap it out to 832 so we can screw this in. It'll be flush. There's no nut that goes on the bottom. We always figured if this wore out, we'd do something different because there is there is room for a nut in here with the felt, 1/8 inch felt. So we could do that, but I think they'll hold up fine. So we'll get that installed too before we cover up the side panel and put everything back together.
Live.
A couple other items we want to show you was how we set the hinge, or to get the hinge in place, kind of an easier way maybe. And we do have the pins finished up here. You can see that we've talked about drilling and tapping these screws in. So they're drilled in, the pins are sticking out. We drilled the side rail, of course, all in that same drill, and then you may not be able to see it, but it's probably helped to countersink that a little bit so when you're closing the canopy, it falls into the hole a little bit easier. So that stuff's in place. Back here, you can see I've got a piece of tape. I got the hinge with a couple rivets up into the canopy frame. Put a piece of duct tape onto the hinge, set it down in place, get it all lined up where you want it, and then just push this down, push this tape down, okay? And we'll pull the pin hinge out, and that locates that hinge pretty accurately there. So now it's in place. Just put a couple, maybe go in and drill a rivet at each end, set the frame back on, make sure you like it, and then if you do, just go ahead and drill the rest of the way. Remember, on the hinge, you always want to drill on the tab side of the hinge. That way your rivets will be offset. You won't have them hitting on top of each other as you close the canopy. Okay. We've talked about the canopy latch components in the earlier when we started the canopy. basically there's the fore and aft rod, the latch assembly itself. This little piece of tubing is just clamped in here temporarily to get this to work. You can do this with all the skins on, the canopy and all that, but it's much easier, I think, to do it out here where you can see what's going on. So as you can see, Dan, if you come in a little closer, you can see these rods. Basically, this tubing is here just to mock up the assembly. You can see how there's no right or wrong or you know, put these particular bends in it. You just have to get it so it works pretty freely. We've got this one working pretty good now, so it engages and disengages. With it unlocked, the key to this is with it unlocked, these rods should penetrate, you know, just the bow, the canopy part that moves, it's just inside here. So these probably go in here 1/4 of an inch on each side, and then when it's engaged, they're going to go all the way through. You know, they're going to stick clear through 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, whatever. Not important. But when it's unlocked, these are just engaged. So when we take this apart then, and we're ready to go over and, for instance, we'll take these clecos out, take this this temporary mount out of here. And I can show you how very little these were engaged. Okay, so the rear tube, the rear rod goes in, the front one goes in. Now, they're just in by a little bit, you know, just 1/4 of an inch on each end. So that's got to mount about right there. We can go ahead and put the skin on now. Actually do the complete canopy. We'll get it all riveted on, get all the rear cover, the side skirts riveted on, canopy riveted on, and then we'll install this. Since we know it's going to work, we just got to get it in the right place. We can do that after it's all together. A couple things, stainless steel rivets on these pivot points. If you use the AVEX rivet, so many hours down the road you're going to go to latch it and those are going to pop. So stainless rivet, I find it's better, we don't put a nylon washer or anything between this, but if you leave a little gap, the best way to do that is take a piece of 16 thousandths or shim stock or something thin, stick it in there between there, pull the rivet, pull it out, and that'll let it work free. But be sure you get stainless rivets there. Of course, mounting to the canopy sides or just the AVEX rivets is fine here from the outside in. So we're going to take a break and get all this put back together and rivet it up, and then we'll install the latch permanently. We'll just take a minute here and we'll show you some of the final assembly steps now for the canopy. This is our latch assembly. Remember, we kind of fabricated out in the middle of the breeze there without the sides on it. I'm going to slide that into position, just get it in here loosely. I've got it in the open position so they'll just catch in each hole. Okay, so now we want to figure out where we're going to position this, okay? So it's really pretty simple. With the latch retracted or in the open position, we're just going to slide it back and forth until each side is just engaged. Just the tip of it's engaged. Then I'm going to take this and level it up, square this up with these two holes are, you know, parallel with the sides or in the right line here, the right line, and we can check it with a ruler to be sure, but that's where we're going to put it. I'll drill and cleco that latch in there, and that's it. Once it goes back in the airplane, we know it's already working okay with the throw. Then we've got the retainer strips and the retaining strap. Retaining strips will come to you looking like this in your kit. You need to trim them down to length, and then once it fits to length, I put a mark on here just so I know where the bottom of the plastic is on both sides. It really isn't that critical. So I trimmed this one. I pre-drilled, you know, 2-inch spacing holes are fine, 3-inch, whatever trips your trigger. These happen to be about 1 3/4 with equal spacing. So I'm going to position that just below the outside skirt line there. I'm going to hold that in place, and I'll start drilling and cleco, you know, this retaining strip. So there's no holes that go through the plastic on this retaining strip, just through the skirt material down below. So we'll get that put in there, and then we'll do the retaining strap. This is what comes in your kit. There's just a clip that goes up on the bow, the turtle deck bow. This other one goes inside on the canopy. A couple crimps for your cable, for your tension cable, and then a quick connect link. Of course, it'll go. The cable will always stay attached to your canopy, and this will disconnect from the turtle deck bow, so you can remove the canopy for flight, maintenance, whatever you want to do there. So we'll get some of this put together, and then we'll show it all finished up. Okay, as you can see here, we got the canopy pin in part way here. We got the retaining strips in, riveted, holding the bottom edge of the glass. You can't see it very well, but the latch assembly has been riveted in place. We got our retainer crimped in here as well. We send you just a piece of cable, of course the fittings here. Shrink tubing, I'm not sure we send you that, but it's always nice to cover those up where the little frayed ends of the cable, so it doesn't poke you from time to time, but we'll shrink those on there. As far as the length of this, I like to be able to have the canopy open, so this is at least perpendicular to the hinge line or a little bit farther open. You'll find that when you go to stand up and get out of it, if it's held right here, it's in your way getting out. So I say anything that's perpendicular, or even a little, maybe a couple inches beyond that, as far as adjusting the length of this. This is just 16th inch aircraft cable. Bicycle cable will work. I will point out, we probably don't call out stainless steel rivets, or the CCPQ 42s for these two fittings at the top and the bottom, but in normal operation there's not much stress on there, but if the wind catches it and pulls it out of your hand or something, I think the stainless or steel rivet at least would be a little better for you. So canopy is complete except for pulling the plastic off, which we always leave that to the very last thing, so if you drop something or the cat climbs on it, you don't have to polish it out. I think we're all set in the canopy.